we have a mandatory, not retirement, but at 65, you have to give up your shareholder status. And then when that happens, if you've been here for 20 years or more, you basically get a third of the bonus, the partner bonus every year for 3 years. And I think I think that's a really nice benefit to the practice, to the to the shareholders that are graduating from the partnership. It's the theory is that you keep the to have the former partners to be kind of loyal retirees, I guess. I think it's kind of a nice bonus. And the having a mandatory age of 65, I think, is also very helpful for to keep the practice from becoming too top heavy. I think this is how a lot of practice gets sold, is that priorities change. Whereas if you have a large cohort of young people and mid-career people, the less likelihood of the practice selling is a lot lower, because when you have for me, I still have a 20-year horizon. There's just no a big payout upfront for lower salary, just not very appealing to me. And also, I drag a bunch of my friends down here. That that would be a betrayal. That that I would not. I think that would be wrong. And even of the people that have been at MA for a long time, a lot of them would not sell, even if that opportunity comes, just because they want to leave. They strongly believe in leaving a legacy behind. They have a lot of pride in the practice, and they also recruited a bunch of people behind them. So and they made their money. So that's so I think we're pretty safe in that regard. But I do think that it's a pretty forward-thinking thing to have that age cut off.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Clinically Correlate with Azfar and Vedant. We're two diagnostic and interventional radiology residents from the University of Pennsylvania, and we are very excited to interview Dr. Cuong Nguyen from Mecklenburg Radiology Associates. Dr. Nguyen will tell us all about Mecklenburg Radiology Associates and why his practice is an awesome practice. Dr. Nguyen, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us.
Of course, happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely.
So I'm Cuong Nguyen. I'm the interventional neuroradiologist at MRA, and I did med school and residency at University of Maryland, and then I did diagnostic and interventional neuro at Penn. And part of this kind of southern migration that started with Andrew Capucin 10 years before me, and I've been here for a little over 9 years, and it's a phenomenal practice with amazing people. So yeah, I super excited to tell you guys about our practice and what we have to offer here.
Yeah, so let's delve a little bit into the specific details of the practice, right? So, the first question is, for the radiologists in your practice, are they primarily reading in their own specialty, or are they reading general, or if there's a split between general and their own specialty? And before we tackle that, how many radiologists do you have approximately in your practice?
Yeah, we have about 60 radiologists at this point. There has been a pretty rapid growth in the past 4 or 5 years or so. It's a combination of it just Charlotte is growing really fast, and our health system that we work for is growing with Charlotte, so we're just trying to keep up with the kind of the intrinsic volume growth. For example, we have 9 people starting this year. And so it's and we also have people retiring as well. We're hiring a lot of people to compensate for the growth, but also the planned retirement of some of our partners. As far as subspecialty, we're pretty subspecialized group. We read, I would say on average, it's about 80% within our subspecialty. And then the other 20% we would read gen, and by gen we mean, X-ray and ultrasound. And some subspecialty is a little bit higher. I think we're a little bit tighter in memo, so it's more like 90% memo. Everyone else is about in the 80% range. And so that's sort of our target.
Do you have any daily RVU requirements?
We don't. So we read from, we have separate lists. So we kind of break it into, we have like a neuro team, body team, there's MSK, and then spine is split between neuro MSK, and we do it by day. And we are experimenting with plate to try to split up the work. But there's no RVU requirement. And as far as the partnership, so let's talk a little bit about our practice. We are an independent practice. We completely physician owned. And it's a 3-year track, super simple. At the end of 3 year, the end of your 3 years track, you get voted on as a partner, and once you're a partner, everyone is the same. So, when the first day of your partnership, as a shareholder, you have the same voting right as the partner that has been here for 30 years. Same pay, we all get paid the same. So there's no tier. Everyone is the same. But even more important than that, I think when you come on as a track, everyone really do get treated the same. The only difference is as a track, you get paid a little less, maybe a little bit less, and then last vacation. But otherwise, your schedule, you work the same number of weekends and evenings as the president of the practice. So everyone get treated the same. Essentially, you're treated like a junior partner. There is a workup period, so you want to do good work, you want to work hard. Biggest thing is you have to be nice. You have to be a good radiologist, work hard, and be nice. And really, that's the only requirement to become a partner. We only hire people that we think will make partner. Otherwise, it's just too much. It's a huge commitment from both sides for the person to move to Charlotte. Almost everyone from our practice is from somewhere else, to move them and their family to Charlotte. And it's a lot of time investment on our part to recruit the person, to get them credentialed and all of that for it to not work out. So we're not one of those practices that would get someone for 3 years and at the end of the track period not make them partners. That's just not how we work.
Yeah, I think Vedant will jump more into kind of the specifics of the the tracks, but I think some more basic questions that all of us like to hear about.
Yeah.
Do you have any moonlighting opportunities either for associates or employees? And what is the average amount of vacation that partners or employees are getting? And do you require any night float?
Right. So I'll work backwards. So we have an emergency radiology section that is made up of it's employed, those are employee positions. And we have a really strong section. They're great people. They work typically 1 on, 2 off, and they cover all the nights. There are 2 people on at night, and the emergency radiology section covers all of the nights. So there's no requirement to do nights. Like by nights, I mean like overnights. And there is a requirement to do, if you're a diagnostic radiologist, to do second shifts. And they tend to be 6-hour shifts. And it's, it could be like 5 to 11 or something like that. Depends on there are periods where we're a little bit shorter, we're a little bit more short staffed, so those shifts get stretched a little bit. We also have a swing shift that goes from 5 to 2, which we probably at some point going to try to get rid of. And those are covered by the tracts and the partners. But there's no requirement to do overnights. And on average, you probably do about 24, 25 evening shifts a year. And maybe 11 on average, maybe 11 weekends is what we do. So as a partner track and partner, you have to do weekends work as well.
Gotcha. And do you have any moonlighting opportunities?
Yeah, so we have moonlighting opportunities for incoming tracks or employees that are in training in their fellowship. We have opportunity for that. We actually are in the process of developing internal moonlighting as well. That hasn't rolled out yet, but that's what we're thinking is have essentially like a plate of a volume of work for a certain amount of money, and then you can do it, during your time off. And it hasn't rolled out yet, but it's coming.
Nice. So you're working hard, but do you play hard? How much vacation are you guys getting?
So as a track, you get 8 weeks of vacation every year. As a partner, you get more. It kind of changes from year to year, but our goal is 12 weeks of vacation. That's the plan. That's sort of the benchmark.
Nice.
So like Azfar said, we'll transition to the partnership aspect of it, which you already touched upon a little bit. And so, you kind of really well described exactly, your guys' process for ultimately 3 years, and then, the potential partners voted on. And with the idea that most people who are on the track, you're having them join because with the intention for them to become partner because of the investment. I think the other big question from our end is really, is there a buy-in? And if so,
Right.
kind of ballpark figures, what that kind of configures.
Right. So we have a small buy-in. We own some property, and the buy-in is for that. And when I became a partner, it was like $30-some thousand. And I think it's still in the same range. We don't own any equipment, so that's why there's not much of a buying. And our income is 100% from professional components. We work primarily for a health system called Novant. It's a pretty large health system, maybe $6 to $8 billion health system that has footprint in North Carolina, South Carolina, part of Georgia, and Northern Virginia, but primarily in North Carolina. And we've been working with this system for years and have a super stable relationship. For example, I was just in a meeting with our stroke neurologist, the neuro ICU doc, and the head of radiology for all of Novant in all the markets. And it's a lot of time investment to make sure that you are the problem solver for the health system, right? We also, one of our partners is on the board of directors of Novant, of the entire Novant health system. He's the past president of the board, and he's the only physician on that board. So he's finishing up his 10 years on the board. So I mean, which is to say that we have a very stable relationship, which requires a lot of work. And as a partner, I mean, we as a group, we invest a lot of time into maintaining that relationship.
That's awesome. I think, one of the tough things with radiology is sometimes we get relegated to the basement or the equivalent of it, right? And, in
Right.
terms of hospital leadership, because we're not outwardly facing like other
Mhm.
clinicians, it's kind of just like colloquially seems like it's tougher to really, get into those relationships and then maintain those. And like you said, really be a contributing member of the health system and, being able to take care of patients in that area. So it's definitely a great sign when I guess like that's almost like an intangible of certain practices.
Mhm.
I'm assuming like if you have someone in that, because I think, where I went to intern year, it was a similar kind of private setup with,
Yeah.
again, um, one of the radiologists being part of the board and then a very good relationship with vascular surgery. And it's that kind of stuff that they don't really talk to you about directly, but, when you're kind of behind the scenes, you're like, oh, this makes a huge impact versus, when there's no presence of radiology at that time.
Exactly, because it affects it's actually directly affects how we provide care to patient. For example, uh when I came, we were in the process of replacing our biplane unit. And there are various options. There's the one that we had was Philips, and then there's GE and Siemens and whatever. And Siemens is by far the best, right? But it's not cheap. So it requires a lot of convincing. But that affects how we work every single day. And that translates to better patient care. And I think this is true not just with interventional work, but also with getting whether or not developing protocols or getting the best possible CT scanners or MR scanners, and we are involved in that process. And also, for example, we recently switched over to Visage from McKesson, and that's a pretty big investment on from the Novant side to get that. It's the most expensive PACS system. And but we convinced them that it is an investment in sort of just an investment in a long-term investment for the radiology practice. And it actually helps with turnaround time, just improve our efficiency. So that translates to better patient care. So I think you're absolutely right. I think, but then all of that takes work. It's work that takes time away from your reading, the ability to read or do cases, and it adds time. But that's also time investment that the practice have to a forward-looking practice needs to be able to invest, because that doesn't translate to an RVU counter. Um, and that you need to be able to do that in order to maintain a good relationship and secure the long-term future of the practice.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And like you said, it takes that investment. And I think one thing that we're very cognizant of is it's very easy to just count RVUs, right? And then like
Yes.
if you relegate your role to that, I mean, I'm sure after a couple years, even if that's what you start out with, at some point you start questioning your own impact. And it is nice to just be able to
Agreed.
know that, you're making a meaningful impact to this is like the region that you're in, to the patients that you're seeing on a, day-to-day basis, and it's not just another patient on a screen. And you have
Right.
that awareness. So I do want to kind of circle back in terms of the buy-in and the assets. So
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
mentioned that from a practice standpoint, it is purely the professional fees, and so but
Mhm.
then there are assets mainly tied to real estate. Um, is
Yeah.
that primarily like the reading rooms that the like radiologists are in, or like what does that really entail?
Yeah, so it's our offices. We have we have an office where our administrative team is located, and our building team is some office building. And I think we own land at some point that we sell recently. So it's a pretty minor part of our practice, and the buy-in is for that. The hospital owns all of the equipment, including all the imaging centers. We staff all of the imaging center in the greater Charlotte market for Novant, and all of the hospitals. There are depends on how you count. There's 7 hospitals that we cover in the Charlotte market for Novant. The Presbyterian is the main hospital where we do all of our high-end cases, but we do provide, like IR-like cases at the other hospitals as well.
Got it. Got it. And then, so in terms of kind of getting into the details of assets as well, from a sales standpoint, is that like, are these assets kind of all under one LLC, or is it each, I guess, office building is its own LLC? And so, depending on when that gets sold, it can be redistributed to the shareholders.
Yeah, it does get redistributed. So for example, we recently sell the land that we own. I'm not the finance person. But we'll talk about that a little bit, but then it's get redistributed to all the partners. The way that it works is that we get a portion. We incorporate as an S corp, and we get part of our salary as W-2, and the rest get distributed as a K-1. And we get a bonus, once a month. We basically pay off all the employees, and then whatever remains, we split it equally among all the partners.
Got it. Got it. And so, you kind of alluded to it in terms of shareholder governance. I know all the partners have an equal vote, but I'm sure their, decision-making standpoint, some may have an experience with a little bit more of the operational versus, like you said, the finance component. So how exactly does that work?
Yeah, so actually that's where I think that's where our practice really excel. As a partner, you are required to participate in running the practice and practice building. But we don't just randomly assign people to various committees. We kind of tailor their assignment based on the person interest. So, I've been in recruiting pretty much my entire time here. It's something that I really like to do. I think I'm pretty good at it. But, if you put me in like finance or IT committee, I would be terrible. I mean, that would be, we would go bankrupt in like, in like a year. So basically the way in terms of committee assignment, we want you to get involved, usually you when you come, once you get your bearings and you get settled in, typically we see what your interests are. We have people that really into, for example, one of the people that just became a partner, Ryan Ehrenberg, who's an IR person, he's really into quality improvement projects. Like when he came in, there's like these protocols that he's like, well, we don't have a protocol for this. Like what happened when you have like a lidocaine toxicity? So he developed a protocol for it. So naturally now he's the head of the quality assurance committee. So basically we find your home and what you're interested in. And I mean, the other things that I've been involved with, I was in operation for 5 years. I was also in charge of wellness for a few years. So there's that. But in terms of the actual group governance, there's various committees, and that will work on various areas of the practice. And then there's operation, which sort of collate a lot of that recommendations, and then kind of work through a lot of the kinks and then send it to the board. The board consists of 6 members. 2 are the president and the chief. I'll talk about that in a second. And then we have 4 at-large members that are elected every year. The chief and the president are they get voted in for a 2-year term. And we just have an election, and the president-elect is a Hub alumni who did residency there and did a neuro and a peds neuro fellowship at Hub, and then went over to CHOP to do peds. It's Manuel Basilakis. And this is sort of kind of back to how one of the reasons why we are such an awesome practice is because one person come and then they would bring their friends, and then we would bring the person after another friend. And this is how you continue to get good people. So, I came in 2015, and I remember I was asking Vince Dom, who's also was a resident there, chief, who was a year behind me, but a year ahead of Manuel. And I was like, hey, Vince, who is your best fellow this year? So Vince was a second year fellow. And he's like, oh, by far, it's Manny. I said, okay, all right. So we were at ASNR, and I I I was like, hey, Manny, you want to go to dinner with me and the president of my practice? And this happens to be Bob Barr, who's the incoming president of the ASNR, who is on the Novant board, who's actually the current president of the ABR. And we went to dinner with Bob, and Manuel was like, dude, you have people like this in private practice. I was like, yeah, that's our Bob. I work with him every day. So Manuel's MD PhD, like was all set to go into academics. His dream job would be to, like to stay at CHOP. And then we put this little seed in his head that, hey, like you should consider coming to MRA. And we work on him for about almost 9 months, and he took the job. It's he's brought his whole family down here, and now they have bought a house, and then they have the house next door. That's where his in-laws live. And then after he came, we got Inji Chen, who is another Penn resident, neuro person, and the three of us got Vince, who was at another practice for 6 years, and then he came, 2 years ago. And yeah, that's how we do a lot of our recruiting, is just by getting people that we know. And then McLean is coming, in 2 years.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we've already kind of spoken with McLean about his job and what he's super excited for. So like it's kind of nice to kind of have like multiple kind of connections with people all across the country. And like you said, with multiple different years, because I guess that's like the main benefit, especially about residency. Because especially from a class that's we have 17 in each class. So between when you start and you finish, you probably have 100, like 150, 200 people that you've interface with, which is really nice to see where everyone's at and kind of get an idea of what's a great practice.
Yeah. I think when you train in a big academic center, you don't really get a lot of mentorship in terms of like how to assess the job market, and how to assess private practices, right? There are different flavors of private practice. There are independent practices, there are private equity practices, and then there are also hospital-based. You work as employee at hospital systems. There are pros and cons to both. And you're gonna, once you decide academic versus private practice, then you have to kind of decide what model fits best with what you're looking for. I don't, I think you guys did a podcast with Ben, right? So Ben is, have very strong opinions about independent versus PE-backed practices. I feel the same way. But I would say I don't think that not all private practices are the same, and not all PE practices are the same. There are probably better ones, and there are not so good ones. There are, I think, for people who wants to just do radiology and not deal with the practice building and the other administrative roles, actually a PE practice, which is kind of like you are an employee. I mean, they call themselves partners, but I'm not sure what it means to be a partner in a practice that's, is owned by bankers in New York. But their practices actually do quite well, and do good work. And if you don't mind having somebody else making the decisions for you, then I think that's probably a good fit for that person. But if you want to have a say in how the direction of the practice, how you run your day-to-day life, and then an independent practice makes more sense. because we make decision that affects how we work and how we take care of our patients, and not an MBA. So I think it's not. I don't think one is bad and one is inherently better. I think it's just a better, whichever fits the person priorities better, I would say.
But on top of that, partners have to take on in MRI, partners have to take on all of these roles, have to be part of committees. How do they manage the work in addition to their clinical responsibilities? Are you giving academic time?
Yeah.
I mean, you already said, people kind of are put into roles that they will be a good fit for.
Right.
So that kind of work may be a little bit more enjoyable to them, but still, it's work that needs to get done. How do they deal with this? And how did your practice deal with that as
That's
well?
a very good question. That's why it's so we all do it in a slightly different way. Some people are very efficient. For example, both Vince and NG. You should ask some of the attendings, at Penn about these guys. They're really fast. So they actually managed to do a lot of the extra clinical work during the work day. I'm not as fast. So I kind of save it until after hours. Depends on, there's certain positions, for example, like the president and the chief, they have dedicated admin time for that. I do get, as the head of recruiting, I get 1 day a month. And Manuel, who is the president-elect, is the current head scheduler, which is a really big job. He gets 1 day a month, but that doesn't even come close to the amount of work that we both put in. But it is an acknowledgement that that there are times that we also need to, because sometimes, like when I do the stuff when I get home, it's almost like kind of putting out fires, but not really sitting down and really think through, okay, how do we better optimize our recruitment process? And that's what the admin time is for. And there's also a lot of time for me to meet with my admin counterpart who does all the coordination, because I can't meet with, her name is Charlene, I can't meet with her on a clinical day, especially when I'm on neuro IR. It's just impossible. So we need to have time where we can just sit and go through all of the applicants, where we, like where we are with each one of them. And having admin time is really helpful for that. So to answer your question, everyone deals with it a little bit differently. You do have to, the workday doesn't end at the clinical, when you finish with reading. I'm doing this with you guys right now. I had another meeting earlier. And occasionally I would do it on vacation. But we also get a lot of time off. So, I think that that overall it's still, there's a little bit of encroachment into your free time, but that's just part of being an owner in the practice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's important to sort of understand and appreciate the importance of that.
Yeah.
All of us have put in time during medical school and even residency to kind of quote unquote build up our resumes.
Yeah.
I think many of us have this, or at least I had this rose-colored glasses, like, oh, I'm going to become an attending, screw all that extra work, go home, sleep, Netflix, right? But I think reality sets in, and it's important to, at least for me, I don't want to speak for other people, but for me, I'm recognizing more and more as I become more of a senior resident, the importance of such work and the importance of kind of, for me, I need to put in dedicated time if I want to think through it. That's just me, my personality as well. And I recognize the importance of it as well. But as residency, we don't get a ton of time off, so that can kind of feel a little jarring. But I'm sure, like in practice, in real private practice, you get more time off, so it doesn't feel as tiring, so to speak.
I think,
yeah, go ahead.
I think one of the differences also that you own this practice, this yours, right? So, what you're doing is to build this thing that you have ownership of. It's very different from working for a large corporation. And also your partners, they also your close friends. And it sounds corny, but it's true, because these are some of my closest friends are my partners. I hang out with them at work, I hang out with them outside of work. I'm the fun uncle to their kids. And so it's not, it's an entity that you own, you're part of, but all the other people that you working for this greater good it's also your close friends. So in a lot of ways, it doesn't feel like work. And I think that you kind of do it for each other. I think that makes it easier. And one of the things I would get back to, you mentioned wellness, and I think that's really important in terms of having kind of a shared goal. Um, and I think, you know, we have always been really good with when people, a new person start, we kind of coalesce around that person or that small group of people and help them with the transition, whether or not it's working, you know, optimizing the PAC system or learning the system, or even like figuring out where to live and schools and things like that. We have a lot of young people with young kids, so we kind of have a built-in support system. It does get a little bit harder as the group gets bigger and every single class gets bigger and bigger. How do we manage that? You know, it's easy to call us around 1 or 2 or 3 people or 4, but when it gets to 9, it's get trickier. But I guess so we have to be more systematic about how we do that. And we have a formalized mentorship system. And you know, just so that we typically have one person in the section, we have one person outside the section as mentors. So it's pretty systematic. You kind of find your own people. I have my mentors my mentor when I came, but I got really close with Andrew Capuce, and he's like my brother. And his family kind of like, I was by myself, so kind of adopted me into their family, and so we got real close. You know, he was, you know, my big sip essentially. So you kind of find your own people as well. So we actually pretty intentional about how we go about mentoring and kind of shepherding people through their first couple of years.
Nice. I think that's a good benefit, and I hope more and more practices kind of take that into account, because it is a very different environment, you know, compared to academics,
Yeah.
and has its own sort of unique challenges and road bumps. And we'll touch on more of those in kind of like a second phase of our
Yeah.
questions, but kind of finishing off some of our first phase questions. You know, most practices offer, you know, the standard benefits, you know, health insurance, retirement, malpractice.
Right.
Do you offer any other benefits that are not, you know, not as well known or maybe different from other practices offering? Something that comes to mind is like a defined benefits plan that I threw in as an example. But do you have any other benefits?
Yeah, probably the one thing that is pretty unique to us is that we have this thing called the basic benefit. So you get after you, so we actually, that touched on another thing. We have a mandatory not retirement, but at 65 you have to give up your shareholder status. And then when that happens, if you've been here for 20 years or more, you basically get a third of the bonus, the partner bonus every year for 3 years. And I think I think that's a really nice benefit to the practice, to the to the shareholders that are graduating from the partnership. It's the theory is that, you know, you keep the to have the former partners to be kind of loyal retirees, I guess. I think it's kind of a nice bonus. And the having a mandatory age of 65, I think, is also very helpful for to keep the practice from becoming too top heavy. I think this is how a lot of practice gets sold, is that priorities change. Whereas if you have a large cohort of young people, And mid-career people, the less likelihood of the practice selling is a lot lower, because when you have for me, I still have a 20-year horizon. There's just no a big payout upfront for lower salary, just not very appealing to me. And also I drag a bunch of my friends down here. That, that would be a betrayal that, that I would not, I think that would be wrong. And even of the people that have been at MA for a long time, a lot of them would not sell, even if that opportunity comes, just because they want to leave. They strongly believe in leaving a legacy behind. They have a lot of pride in the practice, and they also recruited a bunch of people, behind them. So, and they made their money. So, that's so I think we're pretty safe in that regard. But I do think that it's a pretty forward-thinking thing to have that age cutoff.
I think that's a great point. Actually, talking with McLean, one of the things that he had commented on in his, job search was like the percentage of young and mid-career partners in the group. And that's like this unofficial stat really that like allows you to at least like compare, because everyone can say when you're, talking to them, we're never going to sell, but there's
Right.
nothing writing
Right.
for that. And ultimately, in the time between you signing and then you becoming partner, or even having a strong enough voice for that partnership, it could be 0 to 10 years. And if they sell in the
Yeah.
meantime, because now they've gone
Right.
from 55 to 65, then you're kind of now early career and stuck in the situation where, whether
Right.
you've committed time, money, or a location to that area. And
Right.
so that is like, I think in the grapevines of like us and right now as residents, like becoming a factor that we're looking out for as well, and kind of trying to suss
Yeah.
out, because it really it puts like the money where your mouth is,
Yeah.
which I think is exactly what you said as well. So
Yeah, the in our practice, the young cohort, which I am, I guess now the oldest person of the young cohort. I'm pushing on the mid-career door right now, but we it just and we're the largest cohort, and in our practice, in order to make any major decisions like hiring somebody, making somebody a partner, or selling to private equity, requires 75% supermajority, which is never going to happen. Just because, they're just, well, more than a third of us are my age or younger. So that's just not in our interest to sell. And what we also have seen what happened to other practices that sell, their recruiting gets a lot harder. It actually, it makes our job easier, especially in this crazy market. We're still able to get amazing candidates, and a big part of that is because we're independent, and also we take a lot of we put a lot of effort into the recruitment process, not just the typical screening. When we screen an applicant, it used to be that I would we talk to the attendings, their co-residents, their co-fellows. We talk to technologists and nurses. Like when I remember when we vetted Manuel, I called Paula, the head MR, text like, hey, who is your best fellow? And so that used to be what we did with programs that we have connection to. Now we do it for everybody. People that we don't have connection to, we actually officially ask for a technologist or a nurse reference. A big part of that is because we want to understand how this person works. Are they nice to just attendings, or are they a team player to their co-residents and their co-fellows? If somebody's sick, are they one of the people that gonna step up to help? Do they complain about the schedule? They have like one extra shitty shift that somebody have to draw the short straw, and is they going to be complaining? Like, so those things give you some insight into that person. And also, like, something that we cannot tolerate is somebody who treats the techs and the nurses poorly. That just completely unacceptable to us. And that's about the there are two reasons why somebody would not make a partner here. One is if you're not a safe radiologist. That's rarely ever happens because we do so much screening and everyone comes from really strong programs. And then the other thing is, if you're not nice to referring docs and technologists and techs. So if people, I mean, it should come natural. It should be a no-brainer to treat people nicely. But if that's not part of your nature, then think of it as your job. And if you can't do it, then this would not be a good practice to join.
I think that's great. I mean, even when like we're interviewing for residencies, you always get the same pitch of why you should go to a place. It's probably
Yeah.
more beneficial to know why you shouldn't go to the place, right? And so, like you said, like if you're just honest with yourself and that's not something that you like or prioritize, it's good to know that that's not a good fit. So
Yeah.
I like that answer a lot.
I
Helps.
mean, I think, the thought that, people always think that as radiologists, we just isolated work, we just stand at a screen and that's it. And you just have to crank out reports. And that's part of our job. But a big part of our job is to also, be a consultant to the referring docs and be, colleagues with the techs and the nurses, because you get even if you don't work at, the main hospital and you in the imaging center, you're still interacting with techs and nurses, techs out there. The techs call you for protocol questions, and one thing that people have to understand is that the techs and the nurses they are employees of the hospital system, which is our customer, basically. So they are the representative of our customers. So now like I said, you should be nice to people. I mean, that's just baseline. That's what you should do. But if you need some incentive, this is basically a customer service job, right? So yeah, treat people nicely. And I mean, that's really one piece of advice that I would give, is that it's such a small world. Everybody knows everybody. So be nice to everyone. You don't want to be a jerk, because words will get around, and that's how to quickly not get a job.
So, in terms of like formal fellowships versus internal R4 year-long training, do you have a personal preference? Does your practice kind of have a stance on this?
We don't. In general, most people that come, they do a formal fellowship, and then they would do a mini fellowship in their R4 years. Typically, it would be something that would be that 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 would have some synergy with their main fellowship. So, for example, if somebody is doing a body fellowship, having mini fellowship in CV would be super helpful. Or nukes is actually a really nice mini fellowship to do. Both Ingi and Vince, they did a nukes fellowship at Penn. I'm sorry, a nukes mini at a year at Penn, and then they stay on to do a 2-year neuro fellowship. Or some things that say would not be so helpful would be, say, like breast and MSK. That just doesn't quite, not very additive. But if somebody do nukes and then body and nukes and neuro, I think the new term I guess people use is oncologic imager. So I think that's super helpful. So in general, we would say do what you like, and then if you do the fellowship that gets you really excited. I wouldn't do a fellowship that it. I wouldn't do a mammo fellowship just because there are a lot of mammo jobs. Do something that you like. You're gonna enjoy your work so much more, and you can just so much better at it if it's something that you like. In terms of the 4th year, then if you have the opportunity to get your position sooner, then I would talk to the practice and see what their needs are. For example, McLean was gonna do a MSK mini fellowship. And then when he came to talk with us, I was like, oh, don't worry about it. We would rather that you do that extra year in neuro, because you're going to be, when you come here, you're going to be so subspecialized. Neuro MSK doesn't really add a whole lot. The MSK section, they would want like somebody who is really just into doing hardcore MSK, and we want a hardcore neuro nerd. So it's much better that way. I hope that answered your question.
No, 100%. Like you said, in terms of the practice context, what they need, and
Exactly.
depending, I guess, on how subspecialized they are, is also probably going to be the overall kind of view of the mini fellowship, and then, what mini fellowships kind of go with, like, hand in hand with your primary
Right.
subspecialty.
Exactly. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
So when you started off, like what was, or like now, even now as a kind of a veteran private practice attending, what were some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen new, new graduates or new attendings make? And any advice you can give to new graduates or the current residents that they can do in their training program to avoid or maybe alleviate those mistakes?
I think one of the mistakes that I see is that people pick a practice based on the initial compensation. There's some practices that offers very high salary upfront for a job that is not very good. And I think people think 3 to 5 years horizon instead of 20 to 30 years. I think that is a common theme that I see. And that's probably the biggest thing. I would say when you make a decision, try to think 20, 30 years instead of 3 to 5. Because if there's a reason why a practice offer, say, $600,000, $700,000 upfront, and why there are other practices that still get top-notch people offering less, lower starting salary. I also think it's really important to look at not just the specific of the practice. Well, trust your gut. I think that's the one thing that I tell people to do is when you come, pay attention to how people interact. So at dinner, like, do the partners get along? Do they enjoy seeing each other? For us, when we go to dinner, it's about meeting the residents, the applicants. But a lot of it is because we want to hang out, because it's, people with family, it's really hard to get a bunch of neurons out in one place is not easy. So when we all do, and you see, we just chit chat, and it's pretty obvious that we all like each other. So pay attention when you do interview. Pay attention to how the rats interact with each other. I think that can tell you a lot about a practice. Also ask them about how they handle COVID. For example, some practices was, following their tracts, their associates. Some let them go. We, early on, when all the outpatient imaging center were closed, we actually went on a rotating 1 week on, 1 week off schedule. And there was a discussion, but we decided to not cut the track salary. We did not make them pay back the time that they have off. That was forced on them, right? I mean, it's not like they decided to take that week off. It's just because there was no work to do. And as a practice, we were very forward thinking. We basically, all the partners, we withheld all of our distribution, and we just hold that and pay off our employees and pay off our tracks. We kept not just our tracks, but our PAs, our administrative staff as well. We keep the salary whole, even though the work was cut in half. So I think that's how the practice treat their tracks is really important. It says a lot about what the priorities of the practice is. So that's another thing that I think I'm really proud of our practice for how we handle the tracks during the COVID period.
Yeah, no, I love that question about how you dealt with COVID, because I think it allows, I guess, practices to tell a story.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people have good BS detection meter, but I like to think I do. Talking to tons of people. And so, like, I think that's definitely a great question. It's something that I'll probably ask in all of my interviews when I interview for jobs.
And,
Thanks for that.
having connection is really important, because when you have somebody who then they would give you some sort of like insider information about the practice. And even if you don't, try to find somebody that you can connect with, and then try to pump them in for information. I did this with Roy, one of our CV imager, who is the incoming chief. Roy and Manuel start at the same time. They're like work spouses. And Roy didn't have any connection to the practice, and we met, and I was when they were interviewing, I'd been here for like a year, and a year and a half, and so we click, and then he we talk for a long time, and I kind of went through the plus and the minuses of our practice. And yeah, so if you have connection, that's great. If you don't, you can try to find someone that you can connect with, and try to get information from them.
Well, Cuong, this was outstanding. Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course.
This met our expectations and exceeded it significantly, because I think your honesty of kind of like all the answers and all that stuff is just very helpful for us to learn, hopefully for other people as well.